Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're playing Tiltfish, which loses 100 ELO every time I play the best move. Thank you to Akira for leaving this idea in a comment. If you have any ideas you'd like me to try, feel free to comment them down below. My goal is to win one game. Let's get started with game number 1. Alright, game number 1, and I have elected to give myself the white pieces to have some kind of fighting chance. Now, I think the low-hanging fruit here is just to play pawn to e4 and then play, 15, 16 lines of Ruy Lopez theory until the engine is barely rated a darn thing. And I would do that if I remembered any Ruy Lopez theory, but unfortunately I don't, even though I did learn it some time ago for a video, so I'm actually going to elect to play pawn to d4 instead, which, as you can see, the engine did not lose any rating, because this is, I guess, technically not the best move by the engine's evaluation, but it will take me into positions that I am way more familiar with. For instance, I do know for a fact that even though I am a London system player, I would typically play bishop to f4 in this position. I'm going to elect to play knight to f3 instead, because I know that this is what the engine thinks is the best move here. And then I can later just transpose with bishop to f4, e3, and continue to play my normal London anyways. So I'm going to play knight to f3, and we do get bishop to f5 and knock off 100 points of ELO from the engine. Now, in this specific position, I'm not really sure what it's going to think the best move is, but I'm going to play bishop to f4 because, again, I'm way more familiar with these sort of London system structures. Okay, it didn't lose any rating, so obviously it doesn't think that this was the best move. I suppose the engine is not a fan of the London system, but I am, and I do think it will take us to a more simple position where I have better chances of playing the top engine move. I am pretty happy that the position is super duper symmetrical at the moment, because again, the simpler the better, because it's less likely that I'll miss some sort of crazy tactic. I'll continue with pawn to e3, again, just my normal London setup, and that was in fact the top engine move. I can't get too excited yet because it's quote unquote down to a rating of 3400 ELO, which is still measures beyond anything that I will ever achieve, but we have made some progress already. We're met with bishop to d6. I think the options here are few and far between. I think really we have to address this tension right away, because there's no way that leaving the bishop here and allowing this capture to walk into doubled pawns could possibly be the best move. We really only have 4 concrete options. Bishop to g3, retreating the bishop. Should the bishop take, I take back with the pawn and open up the semi-open file. There's bishop g5, hitting the queen, I suppose, but that kind of allows the opponent to develop, so I'm not super happy about that. Bishop to e5 is actually kind of amusing because it centralizes the bishop. Should the bishop take, I centralize my knight in its place, and I'm also hitting the pawn on g7. We could get kicked out with f6, and then I trade, the queen takes back, and it does have some pretty good central control, so I'm not so sure about that one either. And then we also have bishop takes. Realistically, the top 2 choices here are simply trade off the bishop or drop the bishop back to g3, and this is kind of interesting because I'm not really one to take the engine's advice on, I think, stylistic choices like this one, so I'm actually not familiar at all with whether or not I should take or drop the bishop back, because it's purely stylistic. Both of these moves are totally playable in normal human chess. In fact, if it were up to me, I would just drop the bishop back immediately. And frankly, the only reason I wouldn't drop the knight on e5 is because f6 is possible, since the knight isn't really there at the moment. But if this were a normal game, I'd drop the bishop back in an instant, bishop takes back, pawn takes, and I have an awesome kingside attack, which is my favorite way of playing, is just attacking the opponent. But now we have the added sort of stipulation that I have to figure out what the engine thinks is the best move, and I really don't know. I'm going to opt to play what I think is the best move. I think bishop g3 is the best move, because I don't think I want to trade and allow it to develop its queen. It has threats like queen to b4 check, hitting the pawn, arrows as good as ever, but you get the idea. So I'm going to try bishop g3. Okay, bishop g3 was not the best move. I'm going to look at the game review and find out that bishop g5 or something silly, or g3 was the best move, but whatever, I'm trying my best. We get knight to f6 in response. I will say I'm a little bit frustrated that this plan of going into a quote-unquote simple position hasn't really worked out for me. I'll continue with bishop d3 because that's the most, I think, natural London system move. We get castles, and also the engine does not lose absolutely any rating again, which is a little bit concerning because we're on move 6 already, which isn't that deep into the game, but it's only lost 200 points of ELO, and if I don't manage to get this engine down at least another, 1500 points of ELO, this is going to be a very tough ride for me. It's also just occurred to me that I could play by a slightly different strategy. I could intentionally play not nonsense moves, but maybe not the best moves. Or, okay, how do I phrase this? The problem with me trying to constantly figure out what the top engine move is that if I were any good at that, I would just go to a tournament and figure out what the top engine moves are, and I would just play that. Which obviously, as you can tell, we're only 6 moves deep, but I've really not managed to make much of a impact on the engine thus far. It's not impressed by my moves. But what I can do is just play whatever I'm most comfortable with, which right now would be knight d2, c3, queen d2, maybe kingside castle, maybe just leave the king in the center. I'm not going to attack the engine, but I'll play very neutral chess. Maybe knight to e5 at some point, try to gridlock the center. And regardless of whether or not the engine thinks those are the best moves, if it leads me to a solid enough position, eventually the engine will start to attack me. And when you're getting attacked, for instance, let's say the engine, I don't know, takes my bishop, right? Guaranteed the top engine move there is pawn takes with the h pawn specifically, because this pawn would worsen the pawn structure pretty badly. E3 would be weak, etc. So point being, if I allow the engine to come to me, attack me, create the threats on me, I'm going to have very few responses that are actually worth a darn. Which means those will be the top engine moves, which means by attacking me, the engine would kind of self-destruct. I've yapped for way too long. I'll go ahead and throw a move down on the board. I can't play knight d2 because takes would double my pawns, and I can't play or I guess I could play c3. Let's go with c3. We're met with knight to c6, and the engine has lost 0 rating points, but I think that's my idea. I'm going to let the engine play. Also, I've just realized it's leaving the bishop on f5, which is really odd, but whatever, not really my problem. But I think that's my strategy. Let the engine come to me, attack me, and then self-destruct by forcing me to make very specific, non-choice sort of moves, or I have to make one specific move to defend myself. And then it'll just kind of like self-destruct down to Martin's rating, I think. I don't think that's crazy. I'm gonna go play queen to e2. We do get bishop takes. This is a perfect example. I'm gonna go ahead and take back, and that already knocked off another 100 points. And I didn't do anything special. I didn't look for, I didn't try and tap into my inner Stockfish. I just let it play into my hand, I guess. We do get knight to e4. And already, just now, just because it's like the premise of the challenge, I was already going to try and figure out, is knight d2 the best engine move? Because that's the move that I would play. It's very natural attacking e4, but then f5. But that's not my problem. I'm just going to play knight d2 anyways. It wasn't the top engine move, and we did get f5. But again, I'm fine with this because if it attacks me, then I'll be forced to make specific moves, and it will self-destruct. I think that's the strategy that I'm rolling with here. I'm going to play knight to e5 again, because that's what I would play, centralizing the knight. We do get taken back, and it doesn't knock off any ELO. But again, I'm not really going to worry about that until we get a pretty specific attack, I think. Although, actually, right now, I only have 2 captures. So this is, I think, a reasonable chance to try and make what the engine thinks is the best move. If I were personally playing this, I would probably just take with the bishop, because if I take with the pawn, I do get this like momentary tempo, but it's just going to move the bishop back. Its bishop is great because it has its pawns on light squares and it has a dark squared bishop, so that bishop is totally happy. Whereas my bishop is crying in its sleep because it's looking at a whole bunch of dark squared pawns and is effectively trapped. So I'm going to take with the bishop under the guise that, okay, that is in fact the best move, and we've knocked it down to 3,200 ELO. This is a pretty easy another 100 points because I can just take that back. And yeah, 3,100 ELO. I would have been shocked if that wasn't the best move. Pawn comes up to c5. I'd love to boot out this knight, to be honest. The problem is I can't really do anything at the moment with my king in the center. I guess I could trade knights, though. That wouldn't be terrible. Maybe takes, but then this pawn takes, I think, is pretty scary because it opens up the rook, and then I'm getting attacked again. I would play pawn to f3. That's what I was going to mention earlier, but then there's just like queen to h4. If I play g3, knight takes. If pawn takes, queen takes, and then I think that's resignable. I could play, 30 best moves, and I'd still be resigning in that position. The other thing that I'd personally really like to do is queenside castle, but I know that that's a silly idea, just walking into the engine's like tsunami of pawns. So I think I'm just going to trade knights and try and simplify the position. Right, pawn takes back. And we also confirmed that that is in fact not the best move. Actually, if I had to guess, the engine probably did want me to castle there, but I'm not going to castle, I don't think. I'm going to wait for it to attack me and then use castling as a means of escaping. Pawn takes back, so really only a couple of options here with the queen. Queen v5, queen e2, and I guess any of these backwards queen movements as well. I can't really imagine that queen b5 going for the pawn hunt is worth a darn. And I don't think queen d1 is worth a darn either. I think queen e2, queen d2, queen c2 are the only realistic options because they keep an eye on f2. And queen to e2 just feels a little bit more natural here, so I'm going to drop the queen back to e2. And that is in fact the best move. Okay, down to 3,000. We're making some progress. It's been 15 moves now. We're entering late middle game stage, and it's still rated 3,000, which is not ideal. Queen comes swinging out to g5, hitting the pawn on g2 and hitting the pawn on e5. This is another one of those like human versus engine decisions, because frankly, I would queenside castle here against anybody, just about anybody. If they take my center pawn, then sure, you won the pawn, and then I can, I don't know, try for something else. But if I queenside castle and they take on g2, then I'd probably play rook over and then look for like rook to g1 and counterplay on the king side. However, Queenside castles against an engine seems like not a great idea. So as reserved as it does seem, I think I'm just going to play rook g1 and allow it to take my e5 pawn. Oh, which it declines. I guess it thinks that it's so weak that it's probably guaranteed to win it later on in the game anyways. It's still 3000 ELO, so no doubt that was not the best move. And now I definitely can't queenside castle because rook takes f2 is impending, and I'd leave f2 with only one defender. I could play, I can't play g3 because then queen h2, and not only is it still attacking f2, it looks at the rook as well. Can I play rook f1? Just allow it to take the pawn, queenside castles. If it takes another pawn, then just allow it to eat me up, and then I try for counterplay. The problem is I'm playing this like a human, and this is an engine. Oh, what to do? Okay, sticking to the original plan of just letting it attack me, I'm just gonna play rook to f1. We'll see if it's the best move. It's not the best move. That's okay. That's okay though. We do lose the pawn on h2, but again, hopefully if it applies enough pressure, but it's the kind of pressure that doesn't like immediately checkmate me or put me in a critical position, like if I can drag this out at least a little bit, then hopefully every time it attacks me and I respond, I can, allow it to self-destruct its rating. So I'm gonna go ahead and just queenside castle because I'm getting absolutely attacked on this side. There goes the g2 pawn. Oh, but there also goes another 100 points of ELO, which does put it under 3000 now. Again, I say under 3000 like it's this great accomplishment. That's super GM level, but it's better than the engine, I suppose. Nothing that I really can do in this position, I don't think. I can't, hit the queen because then it just takes on f2. Actually, I can't move either of these pieces because I lose f2. I don't really want to move this rook anywhere because I'm happy with my rooks as they are. I'm just going to play king to b1 and hunker down. We get queen to g5, and that also was not a top engine move, but that's not super surprising. Now, queen to g5 is pretty interesting because it takes some pressure off f2. I have two defenders now, which is overkill because we only have one attacker. So I'm wondering if I could play something like rook g1, looking for some counterplay, maybe queen to b5, looking for some free pawns. I'm leaning towards rook to g1 because I feel like queen b5, even if I do grab the free pawn, kind of walk into like rook b8 and those sort of attacking ideas, which I'm not super excited about. So I'm thinking we just throw rook g1 onto the board. We do lose the e5 pawn, and okay, that wasn't the best move either because it doesn't lose any rating. I'm really conflicted because the problem is we don't have that many pieces left. So if I continue with my strategy of just letting it attack me and then me only having very specific responses, you can see that hasn't gotten us all that far. We're down to 2900 ELO, but to be honest, I don't know what else to do because it's not like I can sit here and just come up with top engine moves just from like thinking really hard or something. So I'm not really sure what to do about this. I feel like I'm missing something super obvious. Like there should be some way I can bait it into letting me have responses that are top engine moves or something, but I don't know. I'm too deep in the game now to really do anything about it. You guys let me know down below if there's any strategy you think would have worked. But I'm going to full commit to the bit of just playing the way that I would play, and when it attacks me, c'est la vie, and hopefully it loses a whole bunch of rating in the process of, me responding with very specific forced moves, basically. So I'll just keep playing what I would normally play. Okay, we've gotten to a pretty interesting position. As you can see, I did get one top engine move by playing rook to h1. The original plan was to double up the rooks and look at h7, but then it attacked f2. So then I ended up doubling up the rooks on the second rank instead to defend. But now we have this really interesting position where I think I just have queen to h1. And frankly, against a human, I'd be not mad about this position at all because I'm looking at h7. There are crazy sacrificing ideas where I get down to h8. And there just seems to be like a lot of attacking play here. So I feel like queen to h1 is a pretty darn natural move here. Queen goes back to g7, but I guess the engine just doesn't care. It doesn't care that there's two rooks looking down the g and the h file, and one of them is coordinated with a battery. It just throws the queen on g7, and I'm assuming that everything is somehow perfectly well protected. Not to mention the engine is really not impressed with me because queen h1 wasn't even the top engine move in that position. But okay, I'll just keep shuffling around until I guess it attacks me, and again, the original strategy, which I'm not super convinced by, but I'm not really sure what else to do here. Okay, I'll admit that I dished out queen to f1 a little bit too quickly because I actually did originally see this idea when I was trying to figure out where I should shuffle my queen back and forth. But then it played a5 and I thought b5 was really weak, so maybe I could come after it and come for like some repetitive checks, which I think would cash us some pretty good forced best moves. But then we dropped the pawn on e3, so hopefully queen to b5 doesn't lead to me getting completely bamboozled in a couple more moves, but I don't think it will because it's only really this rook that's in the position, so I do think it's worse for me. I do think this position is objectively quite bad for me, but hopefully that also means that me kind of going desperado to attack and look for some kind of counterplay is also my best, chance of extending the game's life. So I'm thinking we just go ahead and take this pawn. That was the original plan, and that was actually the best move. Okay, so it's quote unquote down to 2700, which is really not all that great, but check means I only have one legal move. So by playing king to c2, now it's again down to quote unquote 2600. So it's kind of working, and and I'm not totally crushed. So this was the original idea, right? That it would try and attack me and, compromise my position, which it's doing correctly. Me judging whether or not the engine's doing it correctly. But it is, effectively, I guess is what I meant to say. But it's not totally crushing me either. We do get rook back to f8, which is amusing because it does stop queen to e8 and any funny business on the back rank. I'm actually not really sure why I can't just take on c5. I normally wouldn't go pawn hunting if I felt the position was compromised, but the rooks are completely disconnected. This guy is taking a vacation on the first rank. The queen is still in defensive position even though there's nothing to defend, and I don't really see any counterplay. So I'm pretty sure I can just take this pawn on c5. And that is in fact the best move. Okay, it's down to 2,500, it's quote unquote down to Grandmaster level, which is pretty good. Pawn advances to a4. I'm assuming it's looking for an a3 break to mess up my pawn structure. Problem is the queen is just sitting there watching that square, so I don't have to mess up my pawn structure. I can just capture with the queen. I'd kind of like to trade off pieces as well, because I'd imagine in an actually an endgame would have a lot of different ways to play the same ideas. Because I was thinking I didn't want to play pawn to a3 because, this outpost on b3 is really strong, but if it can't coordinate with the second rook, maybe I don't care. But the problem is it can. It does have rook to e2 at the moment. I don't actually see how I stop that. Maybe king to d2, but then I leave this weak against rook to b1. I mean, only an engine would leave the rook on the back rank and trust that it's not going to get trapped somehow, so I'm not even going to try to go after that rook, to be honest. You know what? I'm going to reinvigorate this attack on h7. I'm going to play rook to g3. We do get rook to e2 check, but I do have two defenders on f2. Rook to g3 was not the top engine move, so it's still rated 2,500, but you'd imagine I just drop the king back to one of these squares. I'm not totally sure that king to b1 is the best move because it keeps it right next to b2, which could be weak pretty soon. But if I ever do get checked again, I do have another forced move, which would knock off another 100 points of ELO. So if I had to pick between these three for any specific reason, I think I'd just pick b1 because of that. And b1 actually was the top engine move, so that gives me some confidence in the quality of that move. We get rook over to b8, which does target b2. Now the problem is I can't possibly imagine why that was the best move, because this is kind of scary. If the engine thought this was the best move, I'm thinking queen to a3 is what it wants out of me. Because queen to a3, if the rook sacks, that's totally fine. I'll play with two rooks against a queen, and I think I should be pretty happy with that. And I also keep an eye on c3, so it's not like this queen can come down and capture, taking advantage of the pinned pawn. So I'm thinking queen to a3 is okay. Queen to a3 was not what it was looking for, and that was not the top engine move. I have no idea how it wanted me to defend that. That's crazy. But okay, rook comes down to e1, king to c2 is the only move. We do get checked again, and I'm not really sure why I wouldn't just play king to b1 again. Best thing is it's probably still the best move. Okay, wait, never mind. It was not the best move. But at least for the original idea of if I were to get checked, I have an escape square. At least that is still in play. We get pawn up to d4, or actually it might not be in play for much longer because the threat here I think is pawn d3 covering c2, and then this is just mate. So I think it wants me to take, then the queen centralizes. I don't think that's the end of the world though. I think I can just drop the rook back. If d3 anyways, hold on. If d3 anyways, then there's also like pawn promotion threats. So maybe I have to take, but then the queen comes out and that's really scary because that might be game over pretty quick. Like takes, check, king here is forced, queen c7, and the craziest part is I don't even have rook c3 because I dropped the rook on h2. So it would have to be queen c3. Is that so bad? Is that really that terrible? Maybe that's not so bad. I hate the idea that I'm allowing it to develop its queen, but I'm not really sure what other choices I have. I can't possibly imagine that allowing d3 will cause me anything but pain and suffering. So I'm going to go ahead and just take on d4. We do get rook to e1 check, and that was not the best move, so it's still rated 2,300. But at least on the bright side for the next move, it has to be rated 2,200 because king c2 is the only legal move that I have on the board. So that little strategy of throwing my king back and allowing these forced checks is kind of paying off a little bit. But now we have to reckon with the fact that the queen does come out to play. Actually, I don't know why I didn't calculate this. I don't know why I directly looked at queen c7, not just a simple recapture. Because this is way more threatening, actually, because queen d1 is a real threat. Like, if I offer a queen trade, that's checkmate. And actually, what else could I possibly do here besides offer a queen trade? I mean, I'm not going to allow checkmate, but suppose I just pass my turn and don't play anything. There's queen d1, king up, and I guess like rook to c8, and my king is getting absolutely undressed in that position. My only hope would be to survive enough moves that somehow it gets rated really low really fast. Like, if I can survive another 10 moves before I get checkmated, checkmated, 1200 might do something dumb, and then maybe I survive. So how do I drag this out for as long as possible is the only real question here. Wow, this actually really sucks too, because I've just realized there's also rook to c8, enticing me, or rather forcing me to play any piece to c3, and then queen d1 is forced mate. So I really don't know what to do about this. Okay, it's quite funny because for you guys, I just talk like back to back to back because I always cut out the silences, but I've been sitting here for a hot second and the weight of the situation is starting to sink in on me. I actually don't think I have a way to get out of this without getting mated in like 4 moves or less. We'll have to look at the analysis after because I'm baffled by the situation that I've found myself in now. Like really the only thing that I can think of is that I play like some crazy sacrificing move that allows it to take me, and then I try to walk away before I get checkmated, but it's really not clocking to me how I do that for 10 moves. I don't even have 10 pieces to sacrifice. Okay, I'm truly out of ideas, but I'm thinking maybe b4 is my best bet, because I just want to create space around my king so I can try and have like escape squares. Okay, pawn to b4 is on the board and also not the best move, so it's still rated 2200, but we get queen to c4. I think there's only one reasonable response to this, which is just moving the queen over to c3 and blocking the check. We do get queen takes a2, but that was the best move, so at least we have the consolation prize that it's now rated 2100. Queen takes on a2. I would sit here and calculate if there was anything to sit here and calculate about, but queen b2 is the only legal move on the board. Oh! Rook to e2 will do it. That queen is history. And I guess we got it down to 2000, but this thing could be rated 2, and it would still not find a way to lose this. Okay, I'm just going to run to the center of the board and hope for the best. We're going to play king to c3. The audacity of playing rook to c8 and not just taking my queen. You sneaky son of a gun. Okay, again, we have the spectacular consolation prize that there is nothing to think about here. There's only one legal move if you click on the king, and there's no way to block this check or capture the rook. So king d4 is forced, and we do in fact get mated. We did manage to get the engine down to 1900, but that was nowhere near enough to actually put up a fight. So maybe next time I do it with it losing more rating, or maybe I change the rule somehow so that if I get any of the top 3 moves or any of the top 5 moves, or maybe if I play anything better than, maybe if I play something that doesn't lose anything on the eval bar, maybe then it loses rating. Anyways, you guys let me know down below what you guys think. If you have any other ideas that I should try as well, leave them down below and I'm more than happy to get to them. Okay, I did the entire outro and almost completely forgot to do the game review, which is basically canonical on this channel for me to do for every single video that would require an interesting game review, but it is now about 30-40 minutes later for me, and I remembered that I never did it. So let's do game review real quick. As you can see from the graph up top, it was actually even up until move 13, I suppose. And then thereafter, I basically didn't stand a chance for the entire rest of the game. It was just a slow and gradual decline of doom and despair. There were a couple of points where I am curious what it thought, okay, this was one of the points, what it thought the best move was. In this case, I suppose queen to b5 was the best move. I would just never have played that. I was already kind of in that sort of defensive mode where, again, my strategy was play whatever I would normally play, and then when the engine comes after me, I'm hopefully best prepared to drag out the game and, play my forced responses while it loses rating and hopefully self-destructs, which obviously never happened. You're kidding me. It wanted me to castle in this position. That was the best move. That's pretty scary stuff because you'd imagine a rook lift, plus the fact that the queen is already here, plus the fact that it won't take long for the other rook to come into play. And if you need any more facts, plus the fact that the pawn can just get pushed right into your sort of king's position is pretty darn scary. But I don't know, I guess it wanted kingside castle here. A lot of these moves are kind of trivial because ultimately they really had nothing to do with my strategy. There were only a few select moments where, okay, really likes queen to b5, which I think I wrote off eventually because of like rook to b8 ideas, but it is kind of amusing to see what it thinks the best. Wow, it loves queen to b5. It just loves queen to b5. And I guess it played a6, probably stopping queen to b5 if I had to guess. There were a lot of positions like this as well where I was just trying to make time, but didn't necessarily always pick the best move to do so. Then I just sort of blundered the pawn, check. I will say it is kind of surprising. You guys can't see it anymore, but I'll adjust it so that you can. It is kind of surprising to me that I never had a chance. Like I really just never at any point in the game had even the most remote possibility of winning this. If you guys did see, the engine's overall average performance was 2650, and apparently I only played at 1950. Even if I had played at somehow 2300 level, it still would not have been enough. Especially because if you scroll up here, sorry to do so much adjusting, everything doesn't fit on the same panel channel, but I played at 80%, rounding up generously for myself, 80% accuracy, and the engine played at 94% accuracy, so it was just really never that close. Anyways, if you guys did enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.